Great, and we're gonna start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, it's 7 o'clock, so we'll start the town hall. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first town hall of the new academic year 21-22. For those who don't know me, and I suspect you all know me because I'm looking at the attendees right now, and I know you all, so you probably know me, but in any case, I'm Claude Brûlé, your president and CEO, and I'm pleased to act as your MC for this evening's event. Let me first start by acknowledging that although we're all participating in this event from the comfort of our own space, this event is taking place on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. Traditionally known as Anishinaabe, Algonquin people are the original inhabitants of the wide swath of territory along the Ottawa River. In Algonquin culture, it's appropriate for guests to acknowledge the hospitality of their hosts when entering their territory. So with this tradition in mind, Algonquin College respectfully thank the Algonquin people for hosting us on their ancestral lands. I would also like to use this opportunity to thank those who are caring for our Three Sisters garden during the summer months. There hasn't been a lot of rain, and when I've been on campus, the corn, the beans, and the squash are all doing very well. So thank you, and we look forward to the harvest in the fall. Miigwech. We'll now introduce for you our panelists who will be joining me to answer your questions later this evening. Mark Savinkoff, Vice President Advancement, Chris Jensen, Senior Vice President Academic, Diane McCutcheon, Vice President Human Resources, Laura Stenbrough, Vice President Student Services, Grant Perry, Chief Financial Officer, who's acting for Dwayne McNair, our Vice President Finance and Administration, who is away on annual leave. Andre Obanswin, who's our Director of Indigenous Services and Partnership, also acting for Ron McLester, our VP of Truth, Reconciliation, and Indigenization, who's away on PD and annual leave. We also have joining us this evening, Krista Pearson, our Registrar, David Soltis, our Director of People and Culture, and a regular, Colin Bonang, Director of Risk Management. A couple of housekeeping before we get on with the evening. If you have any technical issues or concerns, please reach out through the chat box and the events team will assist you. We have closed caption available and you can do so by clicking on the closed caption button on the main bar. How to ask your questions at the town hall? One of two ways. You can raise your hand using the features under where it says raise hand in the bar, and you will be selected and you can ask your question live. You will need to unmute yourself, however, before you can chat with the panelists. Or you can use the Q&A chat box, again, another feature on the bar. You can type in your question, I will read it, and then it will be answered by one of our subject matter experts. If we can't get through all the questions this evening, we will take the remainder of the questions and we will post answers later on my AC sometime after the town hall. As always, as tradition for our town hall, I'd like to first start off with a success story, and we have lots to always choose from, and it's great to have that kind of problem to decide which story to choose. The one I've selected, in fact, was presented at our recent Reaction Showcase. For those of you who took part in that, you will recognize the story here. It's a project that was an applied research project, and the students won the Applied Showcase for this month of August. And the title is Aim for Change, Algonquin Students Speak at UN Meeting. So 4 students and their supervisor researched the topic of gun violence and masculinity and spoke to their client, the International Action Network on Small Arms. And their stakeholders included Gun Free South Africa, and they have created a workshop for youth ages 12 to 15. They presented their findings and their recommendations to a United Nations international panel last Tuesday. And the goal is to have this presentation available not only in South Africa, but also in other countries, including Afghanistan and Pakistan. So wonderful success stories. We were so delighted that the students did so well at the showcase, and we wish them well on their project and their future endeavors. We also have a couple of other stories that I know the events team are posting on the chat that you can read at your leisure. So we will start as part of our agenda format for tonight with a couple of presentations that will set the tone and perhaps answer some of the questions you may already have in mind. So without further ado, we will start with Chris Jensen, who will present the fall enrollment update.
Well, good evening, folks. This will be a brief update. If you've been to other town halls in the past, this will become quite familiar to you now. If I could go to the next slide, please. Just a quick update with where we're at with regards to our enrollment targets for the fall term. So looking at the top box first, we're looking at new level 1 students. And so still just a couple of short weeks out from the start of the term, you'll see that we're not yet at our targets. This is a little bit of a concern for us because we would normally hope to be slightly above our targets. We know that we will lose some shortly after the start of the term, so it's always best to be a little bit above those targets. Now, there are still some active things going on, and if you've got any ideas to help with this, we are absolutely more than willing to hear them. Marketing's working on a variety of things. I know the deans and the chairs and the coordinators and everybody that we can find are working to convert as many applicants into registered students as we possibly can for the domestic. International, clearly, we're being impacted still by the pandemic, the global pandemic, and there are still many students that have not been able to get into the country. There are many students that are being affected by a backlog of getting study permits, and so I know that some of you have also been working to see what we could possibly do to make it easier for students, international students that are in hybrid delivered programs, some programs that have some online component and some face-to-face component, to be able to arrange it such that our international students might actually be able to still start a hybrid program from their home country with the expectation that they'll be able to join us in a few short weeks. The returning students is a good news story. We're doing well. There's still work to be done there. The returning not paid, as is typical of this time of year, there are more students in that returning but not yet paid. In other words, they haven't yet confirmed that they're coming back to us in the fall. It is a larger number than I'm comfortable with, but then I'm not comfortable with that number being greater than 0. So there is still work to be done there. And part of the reason those numbers are higher than our target is because we did have a very good spring term. And so many of the returning students from the spring term that where we exceeded our targets are joining us for the fall as well. So that's a good news story. So overall, down in the bottom box, you can see the total domestic plus international, which is the combination of new level 1 and returning students. We're still painting a yellow triangle at 101% because of that very normal and typical attrition that happens after the start of the term. We'd really like that total number to be somewhere between 105 and 110% to be sure that by the time the final numbers roll around, we've got the right number of students. So there's the enrollment update.
Thank you very much, Chris. Our next presentation is a combination of Colin and Chris, who will talk about where we're at in step 3 of the Ontario Reopening Framework and our academic plans for the fall. Over to you, Colin and Chris.
Yet again, we haven't sorted this out. Colin, feel free to start us off.
I guess that answered my question. Who would like to start? Certainly, I can speak to this item. In terms of plans for the fall, we've had a fairly hectic summer, watching what's been going on with the movement of the provincial government through the various stages in the reopening roadmap. They have been moving through step 1 and step 2 a little earlier than anticipated, landing at what is termed step 3 of the reopening roadmap. We were watching with anticipation, hopeful that we would be exiting step 3 prior to the start of the fall term. With the exit from step 3, it would have allowed us certainly to enjoy some further relaxation of controls. That has not been the case, certainly with the most recent news that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. Ontario is facing still the specter of a fourth wave. The Delta variant of COVID continues to challenge us. And with recent announcements was also included the announcement that we will stay in step 3 until further notice. And that further notice really hinges upon the public health indicators that they've been following, as well as case counts and a range of other data that the province continues to collect. So vaccination rates is another area that is factored into that. And Ontario had set some targets for vaccination rates across the province. There were some targets that were provincially based as an aggregate target for the entire province. And they had some challenges meeting those targets that would have allowed us to exit step 3. In Ottawa, with the vaccination rollout, we are doing quite well overall, but they do have some challenges that I'm sure we'll be talking about in the near future with specific demographics. Certainly the demographic that is a primary demographic for the college, which is the 18 to 29 demographic. And I haven't checked the website today. I believe Claude had referenced earlier that we are at about 75% for first doses in that demographic, and about 63% for second doses in the same demographic, which is considerably lower than the other demographics. So there is certainly a focus on post-secondary as a sector, not just in Ottawa. This is something they're seeing across the province in terms of being able to increase our vaccination rates in this demographic. So all that to say, we are staying in step 3. Recently we've been talking to some folks and around the college, and we would just want to be clear, I guess, with everyone, if there's any misunderstanding that somehow we are opening more than what step 3 would allow us, we need to be very clear on that is not the case. There are still restrictions on college operations, although less than we would have had in step 2. There are still gathering limitations for indoor gatherings and outdoor gatherings. The college is still subject to physical distancing requirements, and masking requirements are still present based on the provincial regulations. So we're anticipating the fall term. We've done a fair bit of work with the academic areas to plan a fall term that will see a small increase in activity over what we saw last fall, but certainly the level of activity may not be considerably different than what we saw last fall, just from a 30,000 foot view. There is some flexibility for on-campus events and activities that comes with the step 3 guidelines. So there may be opportunities for increased activities, but certainly in terms of the overall picture for the fall campus, this is in line with the college strategy to date, which is really to continue to focus on doing what we can to minimize on-campus activity as much as possible, which has been very much a wise approach by the college to help ensure the safety of the college community. So that's, I guess, a quick summary of the regulatory side of where we are at for the plans. Chris, if you want to add to that, and then we can certainly come back to anything.
I just want to add one brief bit. I really should learn my lesson by now, and when given the opportunity to go in front of Colin, he did an excellent job of presenting everything. I do want to clarify one thing. I know many of you are aware of a memo that came out of the Ministry of Colleges and Universities on July 16th that stated, for the fall term, colleges should plan on not having any physical distancing requirements. You can come on all back and all you got to do is wear a mask. If you read, but that's what hit the news. If you read the full memo carefully, further down in the memo, it put in the qualifiers subject to recommendations from the local public health units and other regulations. And so we're still subject to those other regulations. Colin mentioned that we are still subject to those physical distancing requirements. And so while we made some initial, a small number of initial plans to perhaps in certain limited areas increase the population that would go beyond those physical distancing requirements, we also had plans in place at the same time to walk that back if we were still in stage 3 and those physical distancing requirements were in place. So that said, aside from that very few select number of health-related programs that have always operated under special conditions, we still have those physical distancing requirements, and we have not made wholesale changes to the plans for the academic delivery for the fall.
Right. So thank you for that high-level summary and for those clarifications, Chris. Next quick presentation we want to cover is a follow-up to a question we had a town hall or two ago related to class start time. And I believe Krista will address this for us. Go ahead, Krista.
Thank you, Claude, and good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to speak to this. It's a great question, and I think I have some good news to share on this front. If we could go to the next slide, Sophia. And so proactively, based on town hall feedback, our Vice President Laura Stambra, Vice President of Student Services, that is, had requested that in the spring student experience survey, we add a question. And while we know it would be a smaller sample than had it been in the fall or winter, it was to gauge and understand student feedback on start times, in addition to the employee feedback that we were receiving. And as you can see here, there was certainly a preference for after 9 over, say, if a student had to choose to have classes after 8 p.m. or later in the morning. So it was a modest difference, but it was certainly an indicator. Fortunately, if we go to the next slide, the results of that survey were out prior to our work necessary to prepare the fall schedule, but with a strong anticipation that that would come forward again, also factoring in feedback from employees, particularly faculty and their students, or via their students. We did, where possible, aim to start after 9 a.m. for our remote classes, and where possible for the on-site. As you can see in this slide, we did have some practical constraints. We do have a number of programs that have specialized labs, and particularly with the capacity considerations, not always could we achieve that. So the majority of our on-site activities that start prior to 9 a.m. are actually to accommodate those long labs. So I do wish to confirm that based on the feedback that has been provided, the efforts on the part of the scheduling team is to adhere to that as much as was reasonable and possible. We do note that further understanding of student preferences would need to be considered, along with a number of other variables around the logic and the details that go into scheduling. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions following up from that. Thank you.
We'll probably get to questions if we have any, Krista. It'll be during the question period. So thank you very much for your presentation. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. Of course, a week ago, I announced that we would have a COVID-19 policy for the college, and a mandate that requires people to be vaccinated to attend in-person activities. And we've been feverishly working on the implementation and the policy details. And Colin will summarize where we're at on this at the moment. Over to you, Colin.
Thank you, Claude. So vaccine implementation and policy. This has been evolving at I would say, a very rapid pace over the last couple of weeks. Again, much of this is playing out in the news. Everyone will have a context for, a couple of weeks ago, starting to hear about some local post-secondaries, Carleton U, specifically announced that they were going with a vaccination policy. That wasn't long after we had heard news that Seneca had announced that they were going to have a mandatory vaccination policy. During that time frame, we had been consulting with Ottawa Public Health, and to a point there had not been recommendations that this would be a necessary course for us. At the time that Carleton U announced their decision to go with a policy, around that same time, Ottawa Public Health made a very clear recommendation for post-secondary in Ottawa to go with mandatory vaccination policies for all in-person on-campus activities. We had a little bit of time to follow up with Ottawa Public Health and gain some clarity around that. During that time, people may have seen in the news other post-secondaries following suit, and subsequent to that, received further guidance from the ministry as well as provincial public health sources around the same. During that time, we started working on the development of a policy, and I can say that we are close to having a draft policy that we can certainly put out to the college community. But it's been informed sometimes on a daily basis, sometimes more than daily, by incoming information from the ministry, from Colleges Ontario, from provincial public health, as well as Ottawa Public Health. So they're, being able to develop a policy that is responsive to the current influences is important, and we need to be able to establish that as quickly as we can now, recognizing that those influences may change rapidly as we continue. So I think all that to say, that's where we are currently with the development of the policy. In terms of the direction that we are taking further to the President's communique that came out recently, certainly falling in line with public health recommendations, which we are obligated to follow. This is, we're receiving a lot of feedback from the President's communique around the college choices in this matter. This is a regulatory issue in provincial legislation. There's a requirement for us to follow public health directions, and we have received very clear public health directions. The college has not really got much of a choice in the matter of having a policy. We have some latitude in how we strike that, but even the elements of that policy are very much regulated. So that's why we've been waiting to gain all the guidance we can before we put out the policy. I don't know, Claude, if you'd like me to say anything more on that, or if you'd like to take over.
No, I will amplify that the Ontario government's regulation 577-21, the latest one, puts that obligation on employers to follow the provincial medical guidelines from the provincial public health. So yeah, you're correct there. And as Colin has said, we will continue to refine this and communicate the details so that everyone knows what they need to do in order to provide their demonstration, their proof of vaccination, and other details related to that. So thank you, Colin. We now have a couple of, I think we have 7 pre-submitted questions. That's probably a high number. Typically we get, 2 or 3, but we have 7. Given the interest there is around the startup of fall, of course, and the number of announcements that have been made around post-secondary, as Colin has alluded to. So we'll go through these questions, and they may, again, answer some of the questions that you may have intended to ask. So the first question is around ventilation. So ventilation and increased air exchange or air filtration is critical to healthy and safe workplaces, and it can help reduce the spread of COVID-19. What is being done at the college to improve air quality and safety? So Colin.
Thanks, Claude. Yeah, on the ventilation front, we have obviously we've been in the pandemic game for a little while now, and certainly through last fall term and continuing since then, our facilities management folks have ensured that all of our air handling systems are operating at optimum capacity, and that includes increasing the filtration in those systems to the extent that we can, to the extent that those systems can do that. I think it's important to also note that our strategy in terms of keeping our populations minimized is also an important factor when we talk about ventilation. As the air exchanges for a particular room or a building are increased to optimal level, if we then have 30% of our normal population in that building or 40%, that has the equivalent effect of even further increasing the efficiency of the air exchanges on a per occupant basis. So we really have a really sound and I would say significant air handling systems that are in place in the college that are well beyond what the industry standards and the ASHRAE standards would be for air exchanges.
And we all breathe easier because of that. Thank you, Colin. All right, our next question is as follows. For part-time staff who have no option to work from home in the fall, how will failing the COVID screening be managed? So that's got an HR component to it. So maybe Colin and Diane, I'm not sure who wants to start off first, but see if you can answer that.
I'll give Colin a little bit of a breather there. He's been doing a lot of the heavy lifting so far. So let me start it off, and please, Colin, feel free to jump in. So if any employee, whether you're full-time or you're part-time, finds themselves in this situation where they've taken the COVID screening and they happen to have failed it, what the employee may wish to do at that time is follow up with their medical practitioners should their screening results identify that they would be unable to attend campus. Another thing that we would automatically recommend is contacting your manager is also a really important step in this process so that they're aware if you're unable to report to work. We also have a COVID-19 testing matrix, and it's on the Human Resources website. And I would highly recommend that you would go there and take a look at it. I believe our events team will be populating it in the chat, so you can click on it directly from the chat. And what you would find in the COVID-19 testing matrix is it is to help employees and managers understand how absences would be coded, and it's broken down by employment group and what options are available to cover an employee absence due to COVID-19 testing requirements or any resultant illnesses. So I hope that answers your question from an HR perspective. Colin, may I turn it over to you to add anything else that I may have missed?
Sure, Diane. I would just add to that we are updating a lot of our COVID-19 resources, the education online, as well as the occupational health and safety guidelines. Essentially, if you fail the screening because you're ill, you should be staying at home, not coming into the workplace if you're ill, and following all the same procedures that we had set out in the fall as we went in the previous fall as we went into our first fall opening under COVID-19. Some of you may be aware that there have been some changes with respect to public health advice around how your case might be managed differently if you've been vaccinated versus unvaccinated. We have captured those new rules around self-isolation and updated our links for public health to be able to provide that newest information that's come out from public health. Obviously, last fall, vaccination was not an option, and this fall it factors into those procedures. So all that information should be updated online.
Okay, thank you, Colin and Diane. Our next question, for folks who aren't sure when they're going back, Should they buy a parking pass, and what kind should they be getting? When will we know who is going back when? So Diane and Grant?
Thanks, Claude, and thank you for this question. I'm going to take the very last part of that pre-submitted question first. And one of the things that we endeavored to do as an executive team was to really want to ensure that all of our employees understood what their assignment would be for the fall and where their work assignment would be. So we had asked, under Claude's direction, that members, the managers speak to their employees or communicate to their employees by September 1st so that everyone would know what to expect for the fall, whether they were in one of those employee groups that was connected to an academic programming that was going to be on site. You would know that by your SWIFT assignment or by your teaching assignment. If you were connected to being on site for maybe additional services that would be offered, you would know that by that time period. So that was one thing that we were all pushing for. We're continuing to strive for that deadline to make sure that everyone is comfortable and knows what to expect for the fall. So now going back to what about for the people who aren't sure, should they buy a parking pass, and then what kind should they be getting? I am going to turn that over to Grant, but the only thing that I would urge you to do is certainly there's all kinds of ways that you can get to the different campuses. Ride sharing, there's public transportation, there's biking and walking. And I mean, certainly people that live far away, that may not be a possibility, but there is a lot of different alternatives to getting to campus if you should be assigned to the campus. Now, for your choices about parking pass, I will defer to my expert, Grant, and perhaps you can answer that part of the question.
Thank you, Diane, and good evening to all our attendees, and thank you for this question. I'm almost thinking we should defer to Colin. He seems to be on every other question, so maybe it's best for him. But in all seriousness, so the campus services team has continued to consider these challenges, and they have through the last year and a half of the pandemic, and they've been adapting their services to meet the needs of the college, all our visitors to the college. So there are a variety of short and long-term parking options available. So if you don't know yet, as Diane said, by September 1st, that clarity should be there. So that hopefully will help you determine what kind of parking you need and what the best choice is for your schedule. And there is a parking comparison chart and a parking option selection tool now available on Campus Services website. And you'll see those links in below in the chat. So they've been provided for you. But to provide more flexible short-term parking options for those who will only be occasionally on campus, they've also added daily parking options to 8, 9, and 10 lots. And they've also introduced multi-packs in selected lots, and this provides a discount as well of 10% on prepaid packs of parking. So a number of different tools and variety of parking options available to you. And if you were to purchase a permit and then you're not on campus as much as you expected, there are refunds available, and the terms and conditions are available on the parking website for that. But refunds are available based on a time used kind of proration. So those website links are there, and those tools are there for you to help you select the right parking option for you. So I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you very much, Grant. Thank you, Diane. Our next question, probably one for Chris here. Recently, part-time instructors have been stripped of their credentials. I'm assuming that's network credentials there, 2 weeks after their contract ends. This causes problem for students who want to contact their previous professors and for faculty trying to plan for an upcoming semester. Can part-time teachers who teach 2-3 semesters keep their credentials? Chris.
All right. This seems to be a related to a perennial question that we have around access for other than full-time folks. The policy hasn't changed. So when I hear that folks have been stripped of credentials 2 weeks after their contract ends, I am very confused because this the current policy, the current practice is an academic employee will gain access to those systems 30 days prior to the official start of their contract and will retain access 30 days after the official end of their contract. So if somebody's losing credentials after 2 weeks, please have them contact their chair. There may be a problem somewhere that I'm unaware of, but it is 30 days plus and 30 days minus. The long-term fix for this work has begun on this. It's not a short process. It's actually a very complicated process that involves HR, Workday, the academic area, a change in culture, and ITS. And you put all of those things together and it becomes a very complicated problem. But the long-term fix, again, we are exploring ways of trying to have longer term contracts for other than full-time faculty. As it stands right now, we hire them term by term by term. So when the term ends, if they're not starting the next term right away within 30 days, they are no longer an employee of the college. And we cannot have folks have access to our sensitive systems that are not officially employees of the college. That said, we are in the process. We're in the final stages of making an improvement to this. Currently, when somebody loses access to their system between teaching contracts, their email not only goes away, but the entire history is erased. So we have been working with our colleagues in ITS to improve that, so that everything goes according to plan. And when this is rolled out, that content will be retained for 13 months. So if your contract ceases, you retain access to the systems for 30 days. Beyond that 30 days, if you're rehired within 13 months, your account will be reactivated, and all of the contents that were present when it was deactivated you will have access to that, including the OneDrive. So that is an improvement. It's going to go live. Diane, I just responded to that. Now I've forgotten exactly when it's going to go live. If you recall, please poke my memory.
We were just signing it off this morning, and they had wanted to deploy the test in production prior to August 31st, but there may have been a slight delay as we signed it off today. So perhaps it's still going forward on August 31st, but I'd have to double check my email here. I'm just quickly trying to scan to see a date.
Very good.
Well,
It's
we can come back. We can come back to that.
Yep. So there's the update on that question.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. The next question is, will the college require vaccine passports for all on-campus students and employees? So I'll take a crack at this question. Unlike the Quebec government that has instituted a vaccine passport for a lot of the access to large congregate venues such as entertainment and amusement parks and so on, the Ontario government has so far rejected that notion. And so, we are implementing a policy for vaccination, and as part of that policy, we're going to have an implementation. We're going to have a tool where people can submit their proof of vaccination, and it will be part of the same tool that we're already using for self-screening. And it may, I'm not sure if the name will stick, but the current name of that module is Vaccine Passport. So it just happens to say those words, but it's not in the same intent as was done by the Quebec government, and what the Ontario government is not wishing to do. However, as far as being able to be on campuses, on our premises, inside buildings, folks will have to show proof once through the app of having had their vaccination. And we're going to go through explaining all of that very shortly through Colin's work that he's doing with the contractor and the details of that implementation. So while like I said, the module is called the vaccine passport, but it's not intended to be used in that same vein. But we will have a requirement for people to be at in-person activities inside our buildings and even outside of our buildings on campus for large congregations. All right. Unless, Colin, you want to add to that, or we're good for now?
Oh,
Good
that
for
was
now?
great.
Okay, all right. Next question. I'm answering questions daily about whether my program is delivered online. I don't feel this information is as obvious as it could be. New students receive so many emails, the information has been buried. I'd like to see this clearly stated on program web pages, as opposed to asking students to follow links. Chris, over to you.
Thank you. An excellent question. Fabulous suggestion. When I read this pre-submitted question, I did begin to investigate and look into this. I have learned a few things, that the modality of delivery is posted directly on the student's schedule, on their timetable as it's released. So when the students get their schedule, get their timetable, it's right there in black and white, or whatever color screen they happen to have. So it is available there. But I agree, it would be great to have it on the program web pages. And I have begun asking questions around how we might be able to make that happen. So great suggestion, and I'll take it away. Okay,
thank you very much, Chris. And now our last question, and then we'll go to live Q&A, I promise. All right. Are COVID-related protocols and service delivery considering those that have been socially distancing and isolated for over a year and a half, as far as easing people back on campus in a way that feels safe and comfortable? Will there be some transition protocols or rules? Just because we're able to do something due to eased restriction does not mean we should. Very true. Colin and Diane.
I can start this one, Diane, if that's good with you. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think if we were, had we exited from step 3, this might have a lot more bearing for us, because, exiting from step 3, we had a little bit of a view to that, meaning that, for instance, physical distancing would not be required, and some of the other controls would be relaxed, capacity limits would be relaxed, and would certainly have that feeling of a much different environment than what we are used to with physical distancing. As we are still in phase, or in step 3, all of those measures that were in place in fall of last year are still in place. Masking is still required. There is still a heavy emphasis on all of our infection prevention and control measures. That's the hand washing, cough etiquette, all of those measures. Physical distancing is still a requirement. So there isn't a large distinction in terms of those, evidence of those things being relaxed, as there might have been had we exited step 3. In terms of easing people back, certainly the college strategy to continue to focus on doing what we can to minimize campus populations has some effect on that as well. That people who are coming back into the college, who perhaps may not have been on campus for a period of time, will certainly see big differences in terms of the level of activity that's on campus compared to what they might recall from, 17 months ago. Diane, anything else to add?
No, you've covered all the things that I was going to mention, so thank you, Colin.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Colin. So again, to reiterate, you can ask a question by either raising your hand through the raise hand feature, and I'll identify you, and you can unmute and speak with the panelists, or use the Q&A chat box to type in your question, which I will read and then point to one of our experts to answer. And I see that we already have 2 questions in the Q&A, so why don't we start right off? And the first one is from Human Anashi. How and when will the policy of mandatory vaccination be implemented? And is there an app to be used for it? And if so, when will it be available? So we kind of spoke to that. in the questions that were pre-submitted. But again, we'll answer that a bit more for your benefit, Uman. So Colin?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Human. And I guess in short, forthwith, in terms of the implementation of the policy, things are moving very rapidly. It would be nice to have a lot more time to be able to socialize this, but certainly given the circumstances, we're well aware of the ticking clock, the one that kept me awake all night in my ears. In terms of the app, there is an app that we will be using for it. Claude mentioned it in a previous question. We are using an app that is part of our existing mobile safety app. So anyone who's familiar with our mobile safety app, we've used it for many, many years. Originally, it supported our emergency procedures and general information. Then we extended the use of the app to provide our COVID-19 screening capabilities for the entrances. And now with the same firm, really just adding another leg to that table, if you will, that will be the vaccine passport component of it. So as the policy becomes approved and released, we're also going to be supporting it with communications. There's a great deal of work being done currently to have the app ready to go. We're hoping those things will sync as closely as possible in time and support the use of the app with some detailed instructions that will be provided as part of the communications plan. We do have our communications team on board, and there will be lots of communications around the app and how to use it and how to load data into it when we get there. And I expect within the coming days and less than a couple of weeks, you will certainly see that information rolling out.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Colin. Our next question comes from Jim Moronic. Hi, Jim. How are you doing this evening? With the email approximately a week ago indicating the college will be open on the National Truth and Reconciliation Day, how will the college recognize this important theme? I'm reminded of the summer story in a Toronto paper on this topic, and the quote of "Why do they hate us?" lingers long after the read. The decision seems incongruent with the culture of the college that has been established over the previous years. Please comment. Well, let me first comment and I'll pass it on to Diane and to Andre. This is a federal holiday that has been announced, and as a provincial crown agency, we are bounded by the statutory holidays that are approved by the province. You will also note that we are open on Remembrance Day, whereas federal and public service employees have the day off. I can tell you what happens on those days is people take the day off, they go shopping. They don't necessarily contribute to the spirit of the day off that they have. And certainly from my perspective, I would rather that we are open and that we do something tangible and meaningful to honor and commemorate that Indigenous special day than having people simply have the day off and miss that opportunity. And so that's my 2 cents, but I will turn it over to Diane and then to Andre.
Thanks, Claude. And again, this is the problem of following the president. You've took all the words out of my mouth. And so I also echo what Claude has indicated, that the fact that this is a federal holiday doesn't mean at this time that we have the same time off. However, there's a lot of ways to recognize it. And I know that Andre will speak next on the ways that we at Algonquin can recognize this important day together. Andre?
Thank you, Claude and Diane. To reflect on, to honor truth reconciliation, to honor the children, missing children. I know that National Truth Reconciliation Day is a controversy amongst our people that it's replacing Orange Shirt Day. It hasn't really, because we could still reflect on Orange Shirt Day on the same day. What we are doing at the college in partnership with Truth Reconciliation Office, Diversity and Inclusion, Equity and Inclusion, and the Mamadosan Center, we're working together on bringing in an exhibition from Legacy of Hope. We're going to have it open to the whole college in Nawapan for 2 weeks, starting from September 27th to October 8th. So that will give time for folks, because we know that not everybody will be on campus at the same time. Folks will be able to walk through the exhibition on their own time and reflect on in their own ways. And I'll be on campus as well. Quite a few of those time slots in Nawapan, and I'll be there. I'm sure Ron will be there at times, but our team will be there to answer any questions you do have when you're going through the exhibition. So I think it's a really important day, as Claude was saying. We do need to stop and honor our missing, murdered women and children. So.
Thank you very much, Andre. And Jim, great question, by the way. And I made a note here that we have an opportunity here to amplify your question, because obviously you've asked it. Other people, it'll be on their mind as well. And with the answers we've given here, we have an opportunity to really broadcast this so people are aware of what our plans are. So thank you for that question. Our next question goes as follows. Can you please speak to the robustness of the forthcoming vaccination policy? I'm very concerned that there will be exploitable loopholes that can put our on-campus employees and learners at risk. An example of this type of ineffective policy would be allowing unvaccinated individuals without health or human rights exemption on campus, as long as they can produce a negative COVID-19 test. All right. I'll start on that one, and maybe I'll turn over to Colin or others who may wish to comment on this. My number one priority is to ensure the health and safety of our employees and our learners. And second priority is to see to the continuity of our academic programming. There are many ways in which we can address these priorities. For the last year and a half, we have had a stellar record of demonstrating our adherence to that number one priority by simply keeping our protocols and measures for health and safety strong and robust. Those do not go away. They continue to be our backstop. They continue to be our main tools for the fight against COVID-19. So hygiene, don't touch your face, wash your hands, wear a mask properly, distancing, all of those things continue to be critical to be followed. Vaccination is just one more tool in our tool belt to assist with this. This is not a policy that is going to be 100% enforceable at all times. Case in point, there are people who have been vaccinated twice, have had their immunization, and can still get COVID-19. What the vaccine manufacturers have said that their vaccine does is it prevents severe illness, hospitalization, and death. It doesn't say you're going to be free from COVID necessarily. Following the other measures that I outlined really heighten the chances of not contracting the virus. We've got a stellar record at the college of not having any on-site transmission, and we're going to continue to do that through all these measures. So I appreciate that, the no policy is bulletproof, neither is this one. We're going to continue to put all of our measures in place and continue to monitor for this. That's the best chances we have of continuing to fight this pandemic and this disease on our campus. I know, Colin, if there's anything else you wish to add on this.
I think, Claude, you captured everything I might say to this. As you mentioned, certainly none of our policies, no policies are ironclad. The college has an obligation to undertake its best efforts to respond to these recommendations and to be able to put in policies that contribute to the safety of the college community. Even when we administered our masking policy when that first came out. Questions around, well, what about someone who doesn't mask or who cheats the system, or the screening policy and someone who sneaks in a back door and doesn't screen. Those things will always be things that we will need to respond to and deal with as we implement these sorts of policies. But a policy of this nature is really intended to target the broadest, the college community in the broadest sense. And really, the policy is being designed as an educational tool, a promotional tool, where we're also helping to achieve community objectives around encouraging vaccination and helping to ensure that people who remain unvaccinated receive the right education and awareness information to help contribute to that community goal of increasing the vaccination rates. So that's really the emphasis for the policy. And in any individual circumstances where we run into issues, we'll be able to deal with those based on the typical processes that we use in the college to deal with those sorts of situations. So.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Mindful of time, we'll go to this one last question and then we'll wrap up our town hall. What accommodations does the college have for unvaccinated employees come September 7th? I don't know if that's Colin/Diane answer.
There's perhaps two parts. I can start, Diane, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So accommodations for unvaccinated employees. Generally speaking, there's two reasons to be unvaccinated. There is unvaccinated because you have a medical or creed or other protected ground under human rights to be exempted from a vaccination. That's one way to be unvaccinated. The other way is to be unvaccinated by choice. When we talk about accommodations, this policy does, I guess, butt up against language that we deal with the Ontario Human Rights Code around accommodations in that capacity. If people have a medical exemption or other human rights grounds to be unvaccinated, accommodations in the policy will speak to certain safety protocols that might also be necessary, which will include rapid antigen testing. And there might be other accommodations that could be explored for those folks, depending on the individual circumstances. All of those cases have to be treated on really a case-by-case basis. In terms of accommodations for people who choose to remain unvaccinated, in the public or in the context of the Human Rights Code, there are no real accommodations under human rights for that. If the college chooses to pursue other arrangements that might be helpful for those folks, that would be a different decision, but there is no real room for accommodations for unvaccinated by choice. And Diane, I would hand that over to you now.
Sure, thank you. And just quickly again, because I'm aware of the time, but I just wanted to be really clear that the policy that we've been talking about, certainly from the president's email that was, sent about it, and the conversations that we've been having tonight about it have been for on-campus in-person, and so activity. And so that's if you are scheduled to be on campus. And so, what the question is, what accommodations does the college have for unvaccinated employees come September 7th? What we are talking about is those individuals who are assigned to come to the college and all the campuses. And so I just want to be really clear about that. And then going back to what Colin had said about the 2 different tracks, certainly if it's medical or human rights issue, there are our normal protocols that we have, our combination protocols. If it is by personal choice, as Colin had indicated, there is the rapid testing, but we will be examining that. We do have some procedures that will be coming forward and continuing to talk about with the executive team as we explore what other colleges are doing and what our public health guidelines are, if there are any specific guidelines on this, and we will be developing our procedures accordingly. So I just wanted to add a few clarity points to what Colin had already suggested.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I know we are 8 o'clock, so we are at our time, so we need to wrap up. We do have one more question, which we'll answer subsequent to the town hall, and we'll post after the fact. I want to thank everyone for your participation tonight's town hall and for your thoughtful questions. I know we did not have a lot of time for questions because of the amount of pre-submitted questions, but we'll endeavor to, again, answer any questions we received right now or after the fact. There's also a town hall tomorrow morning, and you can participate in that or submit your questions then. So last one big plug, of course, we've got AC Vision event taking place September 2nd. It's posted on my AC. Please register. We'd love to have you participate in that wonderful event to kick off our new academic year, and looking forward to seeing you there. And personally, looking forward to a new and exciting academic year. And I wish everyone good success with the start of the fall term. I'll turn it over now to Andre for a community closing. Andre. You're on mute.
Thank you, President Claude, and everyone. As we prepared for learners and employees to return to the college, I would ask that everyone to reflect on the many changes and practices in the activities focused on incorporating guidelines and protocols and policies established by health professionals and various levels of government, but balancing the needs to reduce pandemic-related risks and public health. I would like to acknowledge the hard work and clear communication that Colin, his team, and the college leadership, and say Chimiigwech, big thank you. Also, thank you for everyone for attending this evening as we all leave in a good way, in a good mind. Let's thank the Creator and Mother Earth for everything that we do have today and for generations tomorrow. Leonie.
Thank you, Andre. Good night, everyone.